If you listen to the mainstream media, they'll have you believe that there are only two options for Australia's energy future going forward. First, the madcap plan of Labor and Blackout Bowen to make Australia the only nation in the world that relies upon solar panels, wind turbines and big batteries, which will cost an estimated $600 billion, but I believe is much, much higher. And the second plan, that of the Liberal Party, which also relies heavily on renewables and big batteries, with 14 gigawatts of nuclear power, which they price at around $330 billion. Well, there should be a third option for this nation. There should be a third option for this nation at this next election, and that is that we replace our ageing coal-fired power stations with new, high-efficiency, low-emissions coal-fired power stations. We have 21 gigawatts of coal-fired power stations in this nation at the moment in the national grid. If you look at the cost of constructing a new coal-fired power station, and you allow for the current estimates of around about $6 billion per gigawatt, we can replace Australia's entire fleet of coal-fired power stations, that 21 gigawatts, over the next 20 or 30 years, for the equivalent of around $100 to $120 billion. That is more than $200 billion less than the Coalition's plan, and something like $400+ billion less than Labor's plan. That other money that we save, that can be invested in schools, hospitals, roads, aged care, disability services, new fast rail, you name it. But to input that billions, hundreds of billions of dollars extra into the either nuclear power or this renewable scheme would be complete and utter madness to the detriment of our country. Now, going back to the Labor Party's $600 billion scheme, this is pure madness. This is making Australia a crash test dummy. There is no other nation in the world that thinks that they can run their grid on intermittent generation from solar power and wind and back it up with big batteries. And the tragic part is we have people that are absolutely clueless involved in politics that don't have the faintest idea about what they're talking about. With exhibit number 1, Blackout Bowen. Just listen to this nonsense of him here talking about that offshore wind is constant, reliable power.
Renewable energy and lots of it, and need constant renewable energy. Offshore wind is exactly that, constant renewable energy.
Now, this is complete nonsense. As the government's own data report shows, these offshore wind turbines might have a slightly better capacity factor than onshore wind turbines, but they are still intermittent generation. And you can see the nonsense, how this nonsense is going to cost Australian billions and billions of dollars. We have these Blackout Bowen's comments about this proposed offshore wind farm in Bass Strait. Now, yes, Bass Strait's not a bad place to put an offshore wind farm, but the costs, this is going to be 30 kilometres off the coast, have enormous construction costs in building these wind turbines in water of that depth and getting the transmission lines back to the mainland. Extraordinary cost. And what is really concerning about this is that you see someone like Blackout Bowen, they clearly do not know what they're talking about. Here you see this quote, he's talking about this offshore wind farm providing up to 21 gigawatts of generation. Now that's at its peak. Now, that may very well be possible, that on a strong day when the wind is blowing, you could fill that place up with wind turbines and you could get 21 gigawatts of wind power. But the problem is, which Bowen doesn't seem to have a foggiest idea about, is you've then got to build transmission lines under Bass Strait to get the power to the mainland. Now, at the moment, we're talking about building a new Marinus link, which is a link between Tasmania and the mainland, for just 1.5 gigawatts at a cost of something like $6.5 billion and counting. So 1.5 gigawatt transmission line under Bass Strait will cost $6.5 billion at the moment. And Bowen's talking about this wind farm can get 21 gigawatts. You would have to spend on that case, you would have to spend at least $100 billion, not on the wind turbines to offshore, but on just a cable across Bass Strait to get 21 gigawatts to the mainland. And that just gets it to the mainland. Then you've got the cost of getting it, what you need up to New South Wales, what you need up to Queensland. Again, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars worth of cost, which is not encountered in this $600 billion estimate of Labor's cost. Then you've got the cost of properly backing it up. Again, which when you look at that CSIR report, just pathetic about how they try and account for big batteries. Now they do say, and I agree with the number, that you'll need about 16 gigawatts of big batteries to back up the grid, because there'll be some winter's nights or some nights where we still need at least 16 gigawatts of on-demand baseload power, what you need, and you're going to get zero, doesn't matter how many solar panels that you build, when the sun sets that gives you zero power, and it doesn't matter how many wind turbines you build. When you have low or no wind across across large areas of southern Australia where the grid is, you'll get minimal power from wind power, minimal electricity from wind power. So what we're looking at, just for one night's battery backup, we're going to need around 16 gigawatts by 16 hours. That's 256 gigawatt hours of battery backup for one night. Now, my estimate, based on the current cost, that's going to cost somewhere well north of $200 billion. And that's just for one night. One night isn't enough, because you've got to have enough excess renewable energy in your grid that you hope the next day that you have a very sunny day with a lot of wind power and you don't need any batteries to get you through the day, but you've got an extra amount of excess power to recharge 250 gigawatts of battery backup. And you've only got a little block of 8 hours to do that, and you've got no guarantee of what the wind speed is going to be. So you would need at least an absolute minimum, and you need to calculate this for the worst case possible scenario where you can have a wind drought for several nights in a row. You would need at least 3 to 4 nights backup of battery backup. So you're talking there something around about 1,000 gigawatts of battery backup to make sure the lights don't go out in this country. That would bankrupt the place. That is north of 500 billion, 600 billion, up to $1 trillion of cost. And this doesn't generate any power. It just stores the excess wind or solar power that you might have through the day. This would drive the nation into bankruptcy, but this is the premise of what Labor are trying to do. This is sheer, unadulterated madness. It will drive down the prosperity in this country. It will make us a poor third world nation. And the Liberal plan is only slightly better. Yes, I believe that we eventually should build nuclear power stations at the moment, but the Liberal plan is simply a cop-out because they are too frightened to argue against the nonsense of net zero. Now, we currently have China with over 1,000 gigawatts of electricity generation power, building another, under construction and development today, another 421 gigawatts. Now, if China's got 421 gigawatts under construction, which is going to come onto their grid in the next few years, why can't Australia plan to just build 21 gigawatts, 5% of China's total over the next few years, that we will construct over the next 25 years, taking us out to 2050. That simply makes common sense. Unless you are bowing down and appeasing to the prophecies of Greta. That is what we are doing with both the Labor and Liberal plans. They are both madness. We need that third option of coal-fired power plants in this nation. The coal is under our feet. That is our nation's competitive advantage. Building nuclear power is not going to give our nation a competitive advantage. But I believe what we should do on nuclear power, And I speak of this as a former member of parliament, the only former member of parliament that had a nuclear reactor in his electorate down there at Lucas Heights, where I spent a lot of time and speaking to all the scientists and researchers down there. My belief is we should shut down all the subsidies for the renewables and divert that money into building a nuclear industry in this country. It's no point Australia having some of the largest reserves of uranium anywhere in the world if we're just exporting the uranium. We need to own the technology from start to finish. We should set ourselves a goal, a 25-year, quarter of a century goal, to becoming the world's leading nation when it comes to nuclear power. We should be investing in research and development in small modular nuclear reactors, rather than going down this mad track of trying to run the country on solar panels and wind turbines. We've seen everywhere else in the world where they've even slightly have tried to put more solar and wind in the grid, that prices go higher and higher and higher. And that is exactly what will happen here in Australia if we continue to follow the mad plan that Labor has us. So I say, scrap Labor's policy, scrap Liberal Party's policy. Let's at this next election put a third policy to the Australian people, that we replace our existing coal-fired fleet with the latest technology, high efficiency, low emissions coal-fired power. That will save at least a 200 billion on Liberals' plan, and at least maybe 500 billion or more on Labor's plan. Money that is desperately needed in so many other areas of the economy, and that we can ensure that we can keep electricity prices affordable. And let's take our nuclear industry, let's repeal all the bans that we have on nuclear power in this country. Let's set up, let's invest in research and development in small nuclear modular reactors. Let's take advantage of having the world's largest deposits of uranium. Let's aim not just to sell the uranium in the years to go forward, but let's try and be the leader in the technology.